Hello.
Hi, is it Sita?
Yes, speaking. This is Priya, is it?
Yeah, of course. And I hope I can see full background view for me.
Sorry, I couldn't hear you properly. Could you say that again?
I just said that from
Yeah.
your background, I can just
Yeah.
imagine India right now.
Yes, I am in India right now. I'm in Chennai.
Okay, so do you have any certificate, like any certificate in training?
I do in teaching. So in English teaching, I have what is called a CELTA and a Delta. I'm not sure if you've heard of it from Cambridge. So a CELTA is a
Yeah.
certificate course, and Delta is the diploma. So it's the diploma of teaching English to speakers of other languages.
Oh, is it? Okay, fine. So usually we get to see native speakers, right? I'm surprised to see your face, in the
Yes,
a
I
little
know.
timid, and
I
I
just
found
realized
you
that that's
on.
what. Hmm.
So,
Uh,
from how many years you've been training?
Teaching, you mean, or on Cambly?
Yeah, not on Cambly, but your teaching experience.
About over 15 years, 16-ish years. I've been teaching, and most of that has been teaching English. So I used to work with the British Council. Um,
Okay. See.
yeah, and I've worked with schools and other smaller organizations as
Yeah.
well.
What you work? Oh, I mean, when you worked with BC, like what you did over there? You worked
Um,
as an examiner.
And I was an examiner for a while. I was a teacher for a long time. And then I became the academic
Be really
coordinator and then
helpful.
academic manager.
Yeah. Then it would be really helpful for me because I'm an IELTS trainer here. I
Okay.
work with Hello English,
Hmm.
so even now I'm a freelancer and I teach IELTS.
Hmm.
So apart besides IELTS, I even teach PTE to the
Okay.
English language side. So I
Okay.
usually do videos and post videos on YouTube as
Okay.
well to help other viewers.
Hmm.
So actually, my main concern is like, what do you think like is important for a test taker to what to get more than seven? So what do you think it's really important for them?
Hmm. Um, I think one thing is to really understand the format of the exam, especially with writing. That's a very important factor. Obviously, I can't say too much about it, still being an examiner, but I can tell you that, when they give you three bullet points, whether it's in the speaking or the writing, it's important that the student addresses all three of those points, because it's very easy when you start the writing or speaking process, you forget to talk about or write about one of those points. So it's really important to address all of them and give them equal weight.
Mm-hmm.
That's one aspect. The other is the public descriptors are available. I'm sure you're aware of them. And so, really training students with the public descriptors in mind. So, if they're speaking, then trying to use a range of grammatical structures. So, if you're teaching students, you don't want them to start all their sentences in exactly the same way, because then it's a bit boring. It's accurate, but it's a bit boring, or it doesn't really show the depth of
Obviously,
language.
they need to have their own, they need to construct their own answers. They need to not memorize their answers or, practice
Yes,
some,
of course.
some,
Because you can tell,
prepared
right? And as a teacher, you would know. You can tell immediately if someone is giving you a rehearsed answer. You can catch
Yeah,
it
obviously.
like that. So examiners as well will
It's
know.
not
And
it's not a subject to by heart, it's a language. So you need to
it's
understand that. So
precisely.
probably students also feel that it's something like subject and they come, for training and they ask me, ma'am, do you have any prepared answers? Please give me so that I'll by heart and I'll just, utter them in the exam. So
Hmm.
that won't help them naturally.
Yeah.
It will reduce their score if they do so.
Yeah.
If whether it's going to level up their score or not, but I think it's
Mhm.
going to.
Yeah.
But as
Because
a
it
trainer, I
will.
just want to know more.
Mhm.
Apart from, as you said, public brand descriptors, and even apart from, addressing all parts of the task, what is that
Mhm.
point that's really important, and what does, an examiner looks in point of view, you need to understand,
Mhm.
even you need to walk into their shoes and understand, and then you can fulfill what they require. So based
Mhm.
upon that, I can help my students as well
Mhm.
in that.
I mean, so basically, examiners also have a set of descriptors, which are, I mean, the public descriptors are based very closely on what the examiners have. It's obviously a little bit different because it's confidential and things like that. But so they sit with the descriptors and they check everything against those descriptors. So, which is
Okay.
why I put so much emphasis on that, is if students are able to meet those criteria items, then you're going to be able to do the exam quite well.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, because that's all the examiners are allowed to do, right? It has to be an objective thing, so they're not allowed to have a subjective opinion. It's
Yeah, but
standardized
if
across
they,
the.
yes, but as for, can understand, it depends on the number of correct answers that you give.
Mhm.
But writing and speaking isn't like that. It
Mm.
only depends on the examiner.
Yeah,
Uh,
but like I said, the examiner
Actually,
sits with the descriptors. So even if it is, there is that subjective element in that they're in the room with the student or they're reading a piece of writing, they still have to check. They have to be able to justify a particular score, a band score, based on the descriptors if they're pulled up for questioning. So everyone is very particular about matching, so if the band score, if the descriptor says, I don't know, like range of vocabulary or something, they will check for a range of vocabulary. And
okay.
if that's there, then you can kind of, you can say, okay, well, then this student is able to do that, and they're able to do it at whichever level, looking at the nine scores. So um, although it feels like a subjective thing, it is quite, within the framework of that, it is quite objective. They have to be able to tick things off on a
Even
on
though
a
it's objective, can you help with a few points, as you said, like addressing, all parts of the task? And the second thing, as I said, you just have to check the public band descriptors. So can you just tell a few points,
um
like the
the other things
score, what he needs to do, or to make it
the
7
other
or
things I would
7.5?
say is to
With
avoid.
respect to writing, I just want first initially to address for the writing part, and then I think you can proceed with the speaking.
Okay. So within the writing thing, I would say avoid things like, a lot of Indian students start, and this is just generally, even they start with a quote or a proverb or something which isn't necessarily relevant. And the other thing I find Indian students, just in terms of students, not even exam candidates, but IELTS students, training for IELTS, they have a tendency to use synonyms that aren't necessarily appropriate. So, they go to Word and they look up synonyms and they just pick a fancier word and put that in the sentence because they think, oh, it looks like I have better language, but it's usually used inappropriately. So those are things that will stand out for an examiner, and it would be a bit silly to do that. So while fancy language may be okay, it's not okay if it's inappropriate, like if it doesn't fit in that sentence or that context or the meaning isn't exactly the same. Yeah, so that's another thing I would say. Um, Lots of
I
writing
can relate
practice.
to it even when I just check my students' answers when I'm,
Yeah,
evaluating. I
yeah,
feel like some of the words they are, out of the, space. I
yeah.
feel like that.
It doesn't sound
It,
quite right. You know it has a similar meaning.
appropriate. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
So that's another thing. That's a big sort of. It really stands out. It's very jarring for anyone, but especially for an examiner when. So it's much better if they are sort of using simple straightforward sentences rather than trying to complicate it, because then they're going to get, it's going to knock their marks obviously if they're not speaking correctly or writing correctly. um
What are
what
the other things like
else?
that? Inappropriate vocabulary. Like, what do you feel are the other parts? Like, okay, they should not start with some kind of hook, or might be a quote or a phrase. So it
Unless
should
it's
be natural.
relevant. Yeah, it should be a natural response to the question. And I think as a teacher, what I found was really important, because I was training IELTS students as well before becoming an examiner, is that they have to learn to understand the different types of questions that they get. And they only do that with practice. They have to do lots of writing practice. And while students will resist, it's unfortunately the only way to do it. So they have to practice and like get used to responding to different kinds of questions. So some questions will require, a comparison. Some questions will require sort of an argumentative approach. Some questions will require,
That's true.
may require that you start with a quote. So where it's relevant, it's fine.
Exactly.
But
Okay.
it doesn't make sense to start
Apart from
every.
inappropriate vocabulary and quotes, like what is the other point that a student must check with, in
Um,
writing?
I think these are the main things, Priya, because like I said, I know this sounds like I'm kind of not giving you answers, but it really is all in the descriptors. And if a student can sit with the descriptors and just sort of check off things at the various levels, at the various band descriptors, they will probably be all right, because there isn't much more to say. You have your accuracy, and you have your cohesion and coherence, and that's basically what we're looking for. So if a student is able to make sense, responds to all parts of the question, is able to use accurate vocabulary, is able to use a range of grammatical structures accurately, well then, there isn't really much to pick apart from that.
But
So
I think even though they use it, it's really seven in writing. I don't know what it's really, sometimes I feel it's ridiculous, and sometimes it feels like funny and hilarious for me, because even though
it
it's a
can be a
good,
bit frustrating. I know what
expert,
you mean.
yeah, 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 yeah.
We
It's
also have to be aware.
hilarious, but for them it's really frustrating, and
Of
it's
course,
like
of course.
they get disheartened, by
Yeah.
end of the day. They, when they see the scores, like being expert also after writing, putting a lot of effort, they feel, annoyed,
Yeah.
like why
Yeah.
I'm not getting like 7, why I'm not getting
Hmm.
7.5.
Yeah, I
So
know.
obviously they feel that kind of, call it as, they feel sorry for themselves. Right,
I know.
right.
It is. I mean, it is a kind of a tricky exam.
I just want to know that one point, like when I have evaluated and I have marked them, like you would be
Mm.
getting 7 bands minimum. So if they still end up getting 6.5, like what is that? That's not letting them
I
to
wi-
get that score.
I wish I could give you a specific answer, but honestly, I don't know how to, because it depends on so many factors, and it depends on what the student does on the day as well. Often, you find students write really well in the classroom, and then they get to the exam and they can't produce the same kind of level because of nerves or timing or other things. So, I wish I could give you a specific, here's the magic trick, but I really can't. I don't have anything more specific than this to say. So maybe look at samples where where students have gotten eights or 7.5s or eights, and use that as a guideline. I'm sure you're already doing that, but that's something that
Yeah,
might help.
yeah. Some people use a template, some kind
Yeah.
of templates and all, yeah, to
Yeah.
manage, to write, to get, get started with it. So
Yeah.
initially, for the basic ones, it's really difficult for them to produce an answer,
Yeah.
and they feel it difficult to write around at least 250, at least 100
Mhm.
words they can't produce on their own. So it
Yeah.
becomes difficult for them, and we try to, ask them to manage to write something, by looking
Yeah.
at some templates and all. But
Yeah.
what in terms of speaking, like how you can judge someone speaking and you can rate
Again,
0 to 9?
speaking, you want them to be the thing is, you expect fluency, but fluency doesn't necessarily mean speaking continuously without pausing. So I think that's a thing that a lot of students get confused with. They think fluency means speaking fast and speaking without pausing. But that's not it. So fluency, in terms of being able to communicate your message without hesitating, and if you get stuck, being able to work around it is important. So like a native speaker would do,
Right.
or even when you speak English at a proficient level, you find ways to explain what you're saying if you can't get the right word or if you can't remember something. So even those strategies are part of speaking fluently.
Right,
So
right.
I
I
think that's something that kind of makes a difference for students. Um, and again, you've got your range of vocabulary, so trying to include some idiomatic expressions, or the phrasal verbs and those kinds of things that
what do you
make
mean
language.
by idiomatic expressions? Even I've seen that in band descriptors. So what do you
Mhm.
mean by using idioms? Is it so?
Not necessarily idioms, but so idiomatic expressions are kind of a range. We usually study idioms, and they're set sort of full set phrases, but they can be out of place. It's kind of like using a proverb or using a synonym that doesn't work. So
Can you just give
saying
an
something
example of
like,
what?
yeah,
Yeah,
something like saying, if they say talk about a friend, and you can say, we get on like a house on fire, or we get on really well. Even get on really well, when you think about get on, it's a phrasal verb, uh,
right.
but it could also
Verb plus a
mean get on the
preposition.
table. Yeah, it's like saying get on the table has a very different meaning to we get on well. So if they're
Right.
able to use, so that's an idiomatic expression. It's a phrasal verb, but it has idiomaticity. So if they're able to do that, it sounds more the language sounds more natural, because that's what you would hear a first language speaker do. So that's, yeah, so idiomatic expression. So it would be awkward if your student is sort of at band 5 or 6, and they're saying things like, we got on like a house on fire. It will sound very out of place and very unnatural, sounds rehearsed.
Yeah.
But to say we get
Even
on really well,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Even I
but
tell
to
the
say,
same thing for them. Try to use a
yeah,
simpler word if you're not comfortable. So if you're comfortable with
yeah,
self, you're true
it's
enough,
better to
to
be,
know
yeah, it's
language.
better to be
Just be
accurate and
yourself.
fluent.
Yeah,
Exactly.
just be yourself. Just talk.
Yeah.
Just feel free. Just feel like you're talking to your friend and just try to answer it. So don't be nervous or,
Mhm.
sometimes they'll say that, ma'am, I have butterflies in my stomach. So that
Mhm.
seems awkward. Like, when you see a basic, uh, you know, learner, especially, or a
Mhm.
basic level student talking,
Mhm.
using some idioms and idiomatic expressions, as you said.
Mhm.
So it seems, some awkward, or as you said, rehearsed ones. So
Mhm.
it's really difficult for the examiner also, even though he's using that expression, she can't give, score to him, because
Yeah,
obviously
it'll
he
sound, because you're
understands.
also, yeah, you're also checking coherence, and you're checking fluency, and if there are random things that pop up that don't sound right, it's going to impact fluency. So the examiner will have to take a call on that and see whether they're using it correctly in the right place. So those are some aspects. I find that idiomatic, that whole sort of branch of language, is something that kind of gets lost, and we don't focus on. The other thing is
So what are certain tips
connected
that you
speech.
can give for, a test taker?
Sorry.
So what kind of tips that you can give, especially the speaking in for the
I mean,
speaking
this is
module?
one. So my tips are basically look at the band descriptors, use idiomatic language, keep your sentences simple but varied. Don't try and do extremely long, complicated sentences, because that's when we get the grammar wrong. And so,
Right.
in an attempt to be, very fluent and sound, at a much higher level, you end up making lots of mistakes, and then that knocks on
Right.
your grammar grade. I would
That's
say,
true.
as a teacher, focusing on connected speech and stress patterns are quite important, especially for Indian learners. If your learners are mostly Indian, because we have a syllable time. Most Indian languages are syllable timed, whereas English is stress timed. So sometimes when we get the stress wrong on a word, it changes the pronunciation completely and becomes difficult to understand.
Not about the
Um,
pronunciation, it changes the meaning of the sentence, I feel so. Because if you stress it
Sometimes,
in the
yes.
wrong way, so
Yeah.
it's going to change the complete meaning, because the word itself, gives the meaning. Sometimes they're very important in a sentence. So
Yeah.
if you just pronounce it a wrong way and at the same time stress in a different way, if you're not
Mhm.
stressing it in the right way, so obviously it changes the meaning of the sentence.
Yeah.
So
But
obviously
even
that
within
time would be
even
very
within
difficult.
words, even just words on their own, like the word event, a lot of Indians will say event,
Right.
because they're pronouncing, they're stressing on the wrong syllable, and then a native speaker just has no idea what word they've said. So
Yeah.
things like that, focusing on connected speech and stress and all of that will help clarity of speech, and will help them speak with more fluency, because English is meant to have connected speech. It's meant to have those run-on sentences that,
So
one
how did
word
you
leads
get
into
that kind of experience in, or
lots of
hands-on
speaking
knowledge of,
practice.
yeah.
Lots of speaking practice. Get them to join Cambly, because the only way your speaking gets better is by speaking. There's unfortunately
Yeah,
no
that's
other
true.
way
I
to
agree.
do it, and maybe with listening a little bit. So get them to listen to English when they're doing something, like if they're driving or if they're cooking or cleaning. Just have something playing in the background. They don't have to focus on it, but at least it's playing, and they get used to listening to different structures, different phrases, and it'll start, sort of peripheral learning will happen. So that's another thing I usually tell students to do is, BBC Learning English has all these radio programs that are kind of graded down a little bit. So they're nice, interesting stories, and you just have it playing in the background. And so all of this like language gets input into the student's brain. So they're exposed to more English. I think that's another way to improve. But
That's
first
really
speak.
true. Even I recommend the
Yeah,
same kind of practice to them. Yeah.
good.
Okay.
Yeah,
All good. Yeah. Thanks a lot. I really had a lot of information from you.
no
And
problem. My pleasure. All the best with your
yeah,
students.
yeah.
All right,
Bye.
take care. Bye.
Have a nice day.
Thank you. You
Bye.
too.